So welcome everybody. I'm Gerald Neal from Dynamic Creations Transformational Coaching, and I'd like to welcome you to this live Zoom talk by today's guest, who is Ross Deuchar, PhD, who is a Professor of Criminology at the West of Scotland University. Today's talk is going to be on gangs and spirituality. What we'll do is Ross will talk for around about 40 to 45 minutes. Then we'll have a 15-minute question and answer session. Ross, who's also a certified mindfulness teacher, quite a prominent certified mindfulness teacher, and also a life and performance coach. And Ross, at the end of the session, will lead us through some breathing techniques and a guided mindfulness meditation, which will take around about 20 minutes or so. Ross is also to do his bit for COVID-19 and to help people, which is the basis of what we're doing today. He has very kindly offered to do 2 or 3 people, to give them 5 or 6 free, so FREE, coaching or mindfulness sessions. So it can be a combination of stress management, performance coaching, meditation, and how we will, if people would like to do that, then it's advised that I will send out an email and with Ross's details. Ross will also show his contact details at the end of his presentation, and just to contact Ross directly through that. Now, the reason we're not giving the details over just now is because this will be recorded. So if anybody is not comfortable with being recorded, can they switch their camera off? Because this talk will be recorded and it will go on social media, and it will also go on the YouTube channels. So with that, let's just see how we can go on here. And if you would just like to unmute yourself, I'll do it, Ross. So that's you unmuted, and I'm going to make you the spotlight video. So it's over to you, Ross.
Okay, that's great, Jed. Thanks very much for inviting me along today. I wasn't exactly filled with confidence there when everybody left before I'd even started, but hopefully everybody's back with us now. So I thought, since we're talking a lot about spirituality today, I thought we could maybe just start to settle everybody with a very short breathing space. If everybody would just like to just find a comfortable position to sit, and just allow your eyes to gently close, or alternatively to have an unfocused gaze on the floor in front of you. And just allowing your attention to travel now to the breath. Just noticing each in-breath and each out-breath. Perhaps noticing the breath in the lower abdomen, how the stomach expands with each in-breath and deflates again with each out-breath. Noticing also the pause as an in-breath becomes an out-breath, and an out-breath becomes an in-breath again. You may already have noticed the tendency for the mind to wander, maybe focusing on thinking, planning, daydreaming. And this is just what minds do, they tend to wander. So when you notice this, just noting where the attention is gone, and gently bringing the attention back to the breathing. Starting again with this breath. Each in-breath, a new beginning. Each out-breath, a letting go, a letting be. Gradually just allowing the focus of your attention to expand, to take in the sounds around you, the sensations in the body as a whole, contact with the chair. And very gradually in your own time, visualizing the room around you. And just when you're ready, beginning to open your eyes. So, my challenge maybe now will be keeping you awake to listen to what I've got to say. So it's great to see so many people here today. I'm here to talk about my work with gang members. I've been working with gang members for about 12, 13 years now. My early work began in Glasgow and here in Scotland. In fact, it was around 12, 13 years ago I did my first piece of research as a criminologist with gang members in Easterhouse. It was the Easterhouse Young Skinheads. And they did say at the time that I would fit in quite well with our group, but a great bunch of lads. They introduced me to the whole culture. I hadn't grown up in Glasgow's housing schemes myself. I didn't really know all that much about the territorial issues, the gang-related issues before that. But I certainly learned a lot by working with them, and through that work it then led me to become more and more interested in the whole issue of gangs and territoriality, and I expanded my work and eventually came to work across 3 continents of the world. So as well as working here in the UK, also doing work in Denmark, in the United States, and also in Asia, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those different contexts today. And what I've often found is the world over, and it has been predominantly male gang members that I've worked with, that often the way they view masculinity, the way they conceptualise masculinity is very intertwined with the gang-related activity, the violence, the territoriality they become involved in. But another interesting observation I began to make the more I worked with these guys was that often when they were ready to make a change, when they felt ready to move away from the lifestyle, often their narratives, their self-narratives, their stories that they told, the way they described their journeys and their transitions was quite characterised by quite subtle spiritual values. So often they would talk, for instance, about reaching out for a source of support beyond human strength. Sometimes they would talk about once they'd made the decision to change, the right people started turning up in their lives. And sometimes they talked in quite spiritual and even godlike terms about the transitions when they started to reflect back and become introspective about their transitions and their lifestyles. And so I became fascinated by these self-narratives, and I became interested in the role that spirituality can play in enabling these guys to perhaps move towards criminal desistance, as we might describe them, and gang disengagement, and the kinds of interventions that might support that. And I'm going to be talking in spirituality in quite broad terms. Sometimes it might be about religion, but more often than not, what I've found is it's not about religion, but about a much more holistic form of spirituality, including what we've just done there, experiencing things like meditation and breathing. So the work forms that I've spent the last 5-6 years or so working on has formed the basis of this book, Gangs and Spirituality. It was recently published in paperback form. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today. So, as I said, my work has spanned across 3 continents of the world: Scotland, Denmark. I've also worked in Los Angeles, in California, and also in Hong Kong. And as you can imagine, travelling around, and I certainly didn't travel around all these different places, in a matter of months. It took years to do this work. But as you can imagine, no 2 gangs were exactly alike. And Frederick Thrasher, who was the first criminologists really to study gangs back in 1920s Chicago talked about no two gangs being exactly alike in Chicago. Well, I found globally, certainly there were huge differences depending on the geographical and cultural and historical settings that I found myself in. So interestingly though, even though the weapons might be different, the ages of the gang members might be different, their ethnicities might be different, the kind of violence and criminality they get involved in, quite different depending on context. The root causes were so often the same. So it was about what we know now to be adverse childhood experiences. And the research from the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States has shown us that adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, can take various forms. So abuse of various kinds, being subjected to physical, emotional, or sexual abuse during their childhoods or formative years, neglect in the family home, growing up in households dominated maybe by adults with alcohol and drug problems, with adults with mental health issues, experiencing domestic violence, or adults who have spent time in prison. And combined with wider systemic issues like poverty and social inequality that they often find in the neighbourhoods where they're growing up, this can lead to a greater likelihood of adverse outcomes. So the research suggests that exposure to 4 or more of these ACEs can lead to a greater likelihood that individuals will become problematic drinkers or drug users themselves. They'll experience physical or psychological ill health themselves. They perhaps will become involved in violence and criminality and spend time in prison. Now, of course, it is not a natural thing, that a deterministic thing where people will always go on and experience these things if they suffer from ACEs. There are lots of people that experience ACEs that don't become involved in some of these things. But the more ACEs you're exposed to, the combination of those ACEs and the emotional reactions it has can lead to a greater likelihood that these things may occur. And with the men I've worked with the world over, I've found that they have experienced these ACEs in abundance. So all of my research has been qualitative in nature. It's focused on interviewing. So I've done life history interviews with a lot of these guys, where I've asked them to describe their whole life stories and the huge amount of trauma that these guys have suffered is simply beyond belief sometimes, because of these terrible experiences they've had in their childhood and their adolescent years. And often they have been fleeing that kind of trauma, really, when they have joined the gangs. So masculinity has also played a part in all of this, I've found. So Raymond Connell and James Messerschmitt are the 2 kind of seminal academic writers in the field of masculinity. And they talk about the way in which violence and various forms of criminality can become a means of enacting a hegemonic masculine identity, if you like, when other resources and opportunities are unavailable. So in fleeing the trauma that these guys had suffered and seeking out the male attachment that often they'd never had, because often they grew up in family homes where there was father absence, or perhaps if there was a father present, it tended to be an angry, aggressive, violent father figure, or someone who was involved in organised crime. And so they were perhaps fleeing from that and also seeking some kind of male attachment, I think, in most cases. And so gangs became very, very attractive to them because the gangs seemed to wrap a brotherhood around them. It gave them a sense of identity, a sense of status. But ultimately, what the gangs brought to these guys' lives was ultimately just more trauma. because it introduced them to a kind of almost like a toxic form of masculinity, where manhood became more and more associated with aggression, violence, and criminality. And ultimately, they became involved in things that introduced them to more trauma. The kind of violence they became involved in, the kind of criminal lifestyles, the things they often felt under pressure to do, because they were they're self-policing their own masculinity. If they didn't perform these things, they could be relegated to a no-good status. So underneath the tough guy images that they projected was a shadow of vulnerability, always. So underneath it all was fear in many ways. And ultimately, to disguise that fear, they had to do more and more and more criminal activities. And I became interested in how interventions perhaps could enable them to disengage from this lifestyle by reconceptualizing how they viewed masculinity, how they defined it, and how they enacted it. And I was interested in the role that spirituality might play in that, in building on some of those self-narratives that were already, in many cases, becoming quite spiritual. So as I said, as well as interviews, extensive interviews with these guys, the other part of my research has been participant observation. So that has involved me actively participating in the programs and the interventions alongside these guys. So whether it was participating in a religious Bible study in prisons alongside them, or participating in a yoga, breathing and meditation program in the community or in prison alongside them, I got to experience what they were going through firsthand, which was a really valuable part of the work as well. And in many ways has led to my interest in things like meditation, breathing, life coaching, all of these things that I'm now practicing myself. So the differences in the context, I want to just talk a little bit about that just now. So they were projecting, as I said, kind of extra strength versions of machismo when they were involved in the gang lifestyle. And those who earned the most, what has been described as street capital by previous academics. So that's just about the biggest reputation, the most credibility, the biggest networks and ties, earned ultimately what I describe in my work as masculine criminal distinction. So that took different forms depending on where I was working. In Scotland, in Glasgow, for instance, it tended to be about being the top boy in the housing scheme. So the best fighter, the guy that knew his way around the scheme, the guy that was respected or felt he was respected by everybody around him because of the violence that he could enact. And in some cases, that also involved them progressing sometimes to more organised forms of crime, predominantly drug distribution networks. So then it was maybe about who earned the most money, who had the biggest fearless reputation in the scheme. In Denmark, it was something a bit different because most of the guys there had been members of outlaw motorcycle gangs. And so they, from the beginning, were involved in very organised forms of criminality. They were involved in a lot of violence, they were involved in a lot of drug dealing. Sometimes they were involved in things like torture as well, very much representing the male solidarity within the biker gang. In Los Angeles, it was different again. It was about cross-neighbourhood gang banging, as it's been described. So earning fast money from drugs, using firearms, interracial conflict. And sometimes if the guys had also gone to prison and been active members of prison gangs, that gave them even more credibility. Now they had uber forms of distinction when they left prison because they were known not only to being a neighbourhood gang member, but also a prison gang member or leader as well. So it was about Crips and Bloods, it was about Latino and Hispanic gangs there. And then finally in Hong Kong, it was something entirely different altogether because The guys there had been members of triad gangs. So they were businessmen. There were guys that had actually involved themselves in entrepreneurial engagement in organised crime. They were also much, much older by the time I met them. Most of them were in their 50s and 60s, whereas they tended to be younger in other places. So by the time I met them, they had entered what could be described as a liminal phase. So I felt when I was meeting these guys, and sometimes they were still in prison when I met them, other times they were out in the community having served several prison sentences. And it was almost like walking in a hallway with them. So a door had begun to close behind them and another one had begun to open in front of them. But both doors still remained ajar. So they were literally betwixt and between offending and criminal desistance. So push and pull factors had come along in their lives. So for instance, push factors included sometimes they had become victims of violence themselves. Sometimes they had been stabbed. Sometimes they had gunshot wounds. Sometimes they felt they had no protection now. And they feared violent retaliation in the future. Sometimes they just had grown weary or disenchanted with the lifestyle. But there were also pull factors. A lot of the time, these guys had become parents themselves. They'd become fathers, and they didn't want their own children to suffer the same kind of disadvantage that they had. Sometimes they had met significant people in their lives who began to pull them away from the gang lifestyle. So sometimes they got married or they met a lifelong partner. And sometimes they just had developed an ambition beyond the gang culture. They wanted more for themselves. And so these push and pull factors were drawing them away from the lifestyle. But of course, it wasn't as easy as that for them because there was a lot of stigma followed them around. So they had criminal records and they couldn't get jobs. A lot of them had remaining addiction issues to alcohol and drugs. They had fear of violent retaliation. They had a whole range of mental health issues, sometimes PTSD, depression, paranoia, anxiety-related issues. Sometimes they had physical disabilities because of the lifestyle. They'd been shot, they had been injured, or perhaps in Los Angeles particularly, they had the tattoos covered, their whole face and their neck covered in gang-related tattoos, which made them pretty unemployable. Or sometimes they had the scars, in Glasgow, they might have had scars from gang violence. And so they were ready for change. Their thinking patterns had changed, their behaviour, their values had changed. They were maybe beginning to address some of those lingering issues of trauma as well, but they were still being held back. And I was interested in what was going through the minds of these guys, what they were experiencing, these early stage desisters, as we might describe them, and the role of spirituality at that point in their transition. So in the book, I very much make the distinction between religion and spirituality. So religion for me is about maybe a system of worship and doctrine, usually shared within a group. It's quite a kind of formal process. Whereas spirituality is much more difficult to define. It's much more generic. It's much more holistic. So it's been described by various authors as a transcendent experience of some kind, focusing on deeper meaning, purpose, and connection with others, or maybe just any kind of subjective experience that results in greater knowledge and love, or a new comprehension of new meanings in life, which enhances personal growth. So what I wanted to do was look at these interventions these guys were becoming involved in and let them speak for themselves about what spirituality was all about, or whether it was religion. So I'm going to describe some of the insights that I gained, and I've got some case study to share with you on a slideshow in a minute, but I want to just talk very briefly about what I found in the prisons in Scotland and Denmark, and also what I saw in Hong Kong, because in those contexts, I found it was religion actually that had enabled a lot of the guys I worked with to move on. So for instance, in the Scottish and the Danish prisons I was working in, the men that I was interviewing and talking to, having informal conversations with, hanging out with, if you like, for a period of time, had been introduced to prison chaplains, and they found that prison chaplaincy played a really important role for them during the time they were in prison. And the first reason for that was it simply made them feel human again to talk to these chaplains, because everywhere else they talked about it feeling like being in the jail. But when they met the prison chaplains, they felt they were outside the jail. So there were nice comfortable chairs, nice carpets, there was coffee and biscuits available. But more than anything, there was the issue of confidentiality. They knew that they could open up to these chaplains and share anything with them, whereas there was no one else that they could open up to in the prison environment because of the prison code, the tough guy image, you know, that they just couldn't be seen to talk about their emotions or their feelings. So these chaplains seemed to provide a sense of social support. And in the process, for some, they were able to either discover a religion or a religious faith for the first time, or sometimes rekindle a previous religious faith, whether it was Christian or sometimes an Islamic faith. And this provided them with a new sense of fellowship and also a feeling that they had been forgiven, which was quite important to them, a feeling they had been forgiven for some of the crimes they had involved themselves in. And in Hong Kong, religion was even more important for the guys I worked with. These triad members felt that religion provided them with a credible signal to signal to other triad members, no, they were gone. You know, they were actually leaving the lifestyle now. They were disengaging from the triad culture. And so the Hong Kong Christian Society, which was the outreach organisation that I worked with there, provided an opportunity for these guys to spend half their week engaging in religious study groups in the study centre, and the other half of the week doing work placements where they were sent out to work, doing manual work in restaurants, in bars, and different types of, sometimes they did painting and decorating, manual labour, etc. And it was a real combination when they were in the study centre of quite fundamentalist Christian Bible study combined with Pentecostal worship. And this enabled them to find a new alternative brotherhood, because these men were finding fellowship from other Christians instead of other gang members. And it also, as I said, gave them that important signal that they had now disengaged, and they were beginning to view themselves as men of God rather than gang members. So religion in some cases did play an important part, but more often than not, what I found was in the other locations, including with some of the men in the prisons as well in Denmark, but also in Los Angeles, and also in the communities in Denmark, it was very much about almost like an eclectic form of spirituality. And I'm going to share this slideshow with you now to just share a couple of case studies with you. So, Homeboy Industries just quite simply became one of my favourite places to go. So this is the largest and most renowned gang intervention programme in the United States and probably globally. It's existed since the beginning of the century, around 2001, and formed and founded by Father Gregory Boyle, who is a Jesuit priest and has spent many, many years burying hundreds of gang members in the inner city of Los Angeles, and came to the conclusion that actually these guys don't join gangs because they're seeking out something. They're not looking for something. They're not looking for some kind of identity or status, really. They're fleeing something. So they're running away from trauma that they've suffered. And really, gangs form because of a lethal absence of hope. And in his book, Tattoos in the Heart, which is just an absolutely wonderful read, he talks about gangs being bastions of conditional love. So one false move and you find yourself outside, slights are remembered, errors in judgment held against you forever. If a homeboy doesn't step up to the plate, do the required duty, then you're relegated to a no-good status. And this is a status from which it's hard to recover. Homeboy Industries seeks to be a community of unconditional love. Community will always trump gang any day. So it's not about somebody reaching out and trying to fix these guys in Homeboy Industries. It's about everybody reaching out and supporting one another in a process of mutual transformation. So it's an 18-month program. And these were the guys that I worked with closely there. I also participated in the program. I've been to visit Homeboy Industries twice now, spent time participating in the various group therapy sessions, etc., but also worked intensively with these guys. So you can see they were all in their 20s and 30s by the time they came to the program. They were all from the most disadvantaged areas of the city. They had all been involved in drug dealing and street violence, car theft, attempted murder, murder charges. Some of them had been in supermax prisons, high security prisons, armed robbery. But more importantly, if you look beyond the criminal activity, they also had huge issues, lingering addiction issues, lots of mental health issues. A lot of them had their kids taken into care, and a lot of them still had anger issues as well. So they were very disadvantaged, really traumatized, wounded individuals when they came to this program. And the interesting thing is that immediately they join the program, they're employed, they're working. So they're earning the minimum wage. They're maybe starting off by doing maintenance work. So the first thing that you do when you arrive in Homeboy Industries, the first thing you see is guys maybe covered in facial tattoos, washing the windows, cleaning the floors, taking out the garbage, or greeting you on the reception desk. And then they're signposted into the industries. So they might work in the Homegirl Cafe. So when you go there, you're served your breakfast, your lunch by these guys, and females as well, lots of female gang members in the program. And also the Homeboy Bakery, the Homeboy Merchandising, and a whole range of other industries. But as Father G, as he's known to the homeboys and homegirls, always says, okay, a job is fine, but healing is for life. So lots of people might leave the program without having been healed if it was just about offering them a job, which originally the program was just about that. But now it's about a whole range of support classes alongside that. So while they're on the program, they're working, but they're also engaging. There's AA there, there's NA there, Cocaine Anonymous, Project Fatherhood, so they're learning about parenting skills, anger management classes, group therapy classes, and a free tattoo removal service, which of course is very important to them, because once they get these tattoos removed, they instantly become much more employable. But the focal point, as I saw and experienced when I was there on a number of occasions, is the daily Thought for the Day sessions. So very much drawing upon the recovery community. It's about a check-in session. Somebody shares where they're at, their transitional experience. Celebrations are made. So somebody might be 2 years clean from drugs. Somebody might have just got their kids back from care. Somebody might have got their driving license back. Whatever it is, it's celebrated. And importantly, people step up to the podium and they open up and they talk about it. Sometimes it's Father G that takes the lead, but more often than not, it's the trainees, as they become known in this programme, or the navigators and the mentors that work alongside them, most of whom have also been gang members in the past. And so this careful blend of employability opportunities, personal support, and also generative activities is really important, because in standing up at the podium or in sitting in the group classes and sharing their insights with one another, these guys are gradually transitioning and changing. Benjamin said to me during one of our discussions, all the groups we go to here, it gives me the chance to, I used to be a real personal person. I didn't want to talk to no one or express myself. I didn't want anyone to know nothing about my life. Now all these groups are helping me open up, talk about my story. We're all similar. We all have similar stories. So I'm glad I'm able to bond with other people that have been through and feel the same stuff I have. The way I see it is we help each other, whether we know it or not. So in the process of opening up and sharing, these guys are literally creating what's been described by the criminologist Shad Maruna as redemption scripts, rewriting a damaged past into a more productive and worthy future, and in the process becoming wounded healers, sharing that past and those experiences to support the lives of each other. This programme is quite simply about endless compassion and acceptance. And I think you can't help, when you step in to Homeboy Industries, going through a personal journey of your own. And I certainly did while I was there. You can feel the tenderness, the endless acceptance, and the unconditional love cascading through every part of the programme. Francisco said to me, one of the things I love about this place is you're not judged. And the reasons they let you express yourself is because how can you give a person feedback if you're not real with yourself? If I go in an anger management class and say, yeah, I was going to kick this dude's ass, they start breaking it down, they let you analyse it, they let you think it out. Whereas in most other classes, he says, you've got to say what people want to hear. Right here, you can be you, you know. So it's that real authenticity and everybody really seeing themselves as being in kinship with one another. And that's how spirituality is defined here. An important part of the programme is meditation and healing. And it was introduced actually to the programme by the movie actor Jim Carrey, who's become quite associated with Homeboy Industries over the years. And so at a certain point in the day, people can gather and they can just take a breath, as we did earlier. And gradually they begin to create a distance between thought and action. So that trauma no longer engulfs them so much. Those difficult thoughts and emotions no longer needs to lead to anger, to aggression or to violence. And Father G, interestingly, always says, you know, people come and visit this place, they see everything, they hear everything, they visit all the groups, they see in mindfulness, they see all the other activities, and then they'll turn around and say to him, now show me the spiritual part. And his answer is always the same, well, you've just seen it. Because actually, it's not something that is separate from anything else. Even although he's a deeply religious man, this programme's actually not about religion. It's actually about soaking everything that they do in the spirit. It's a place of discovery, he said to me, where people discover the truth of who they are. Everybody is being returned to themselves. If you don't welcome your own wounds, then you're going to despise the woundedness in others. And I really love that whole notion of being returned to yourself, because that's quite simply what these guys were experienced. They weren't born tough guys. They weren't born gang members. They weren't born criminals. They were born full of compassion and love, and that is what they're being returned to. So it's a therapeutic alliances, mindfulness, group therapy, unconditional love and kinship that very much characterises this programme. And it leads to, ultimately, the dismantling of gang mentalities, particularly gang masculinity among the guys that I was working with. And these were some of the things they said to me. Juan talked about guns giving him the power in the past, but now his kids are the things that give him the power. Diego talked about calmness and humility, waiting for those little paychecks to come in, to live day by day, trying to be a man and fighting for what's right for my kids. Benjamin talked about manning up. What did that mean to him? Well, it now meant getting a career, getting an apartment, looking after his family and providing for his daughter. And Sergio, who had experienced unspeakable trauma in his past, sexual as well as physical abuse as a child, now wanted to become a college graduate, wanted to get off his ass and become the person he wanted to become. And it was an absolute joy for me to return to Los Angeles in November, there 5 years after I'd done these interviews, and to meet up with some of these guys again and see where they're at now. 5 years on, Benjamin had got his apartment. He now worked in solar panel industries full-time, and he now was providing for his daughter. Sergio now had completed his college course, and now he had a career, he had a family, he had a home. So this program, of course, has its limitations because it can't reach out to everybody in Los Angeles. There's only so many people can become enrolled. Every day when you arrive at the door, there are queues of people waiting to see Father G, hoping to get onto the program. Sometimes they have to be turned away. And not everybody makes it. Some people fall back into the lifestyle, fall back into addiction. But the important thing is they're always welcomed back. So it's about endless inclusion as well. And they're beginning to contest gang masculinity and embracing new countercultural frames of masculine identity. They're beginning to replace street capital with what could be described as spiritual capital, focused on becoming family men and men of peace. Now, interestingly, we have a little bit of Los Angeles right here in Glasgow, the work of the Violence Reduction Unit in Glasgow, and I think Callum's here today. It's been an amazing journey, the way that this programme has influenced the policy and the practice here. So we now have our own version, Braveheart Industries and the Street and Arrow project, which is based in the Dental Hospital in Sucky Hall Street in Glasgow. It's similar, it's an 18-month programme for those who have been involved in offending. There's check-in and check-out sessions. I've had the privilege to be able to experience these on several occasions with the guys there. There's work placements. The guys are employed as chefs and waiters, but more importantly, they're exposed to 24/7 mentoring, counselling, and mindfulness. And it's very interesting. Sometimes people have said to me, yeah, it's okay, meditation, that works maybe in America, maybe in Denmark, but it wouldn't work here. We've got the real tough guys in Glasgow. But actually, meditation is playing a really important role in the transitions and the journeys of some of these guys. So it's great to see how well that project is doing and how it's been informed by Homeboy Industries. The second case study I wanted to share with you was to go a step further and show you a different type of meditation, breathing and yoga practice within the context of what I saw in Denmark. So this is the Breathe Smart program and the Prison Smart program, established almost 20 years ago. It introduces participants to what is known as Sudarshan Kriya Yoga, which combines the Ujjayi breathing, Bastrika Pranayama, or the bellows breath. Hopefully we might get time to try that today, and cyclical breathing and deep layers of meditation, which goes beyond mindfulness, a little bit deeper. It uses a mantra as the focus for the meditation. It's based on the teachings of the Indian spiritual leader Sri Sri Ravi Shankar and promoted globally by the Art of Living Foundation, founded in Denmark in 2002 by Jacob Lund, who's the coordinator of the Art of Living Prison program and Breathe Smart program there. But it's very much based on the Art of Living program, which has been piloted, interestingly, in London, in prisons there, in Manchester, in Belfast, but never in Scotland so far. So these were the guys that I worked with there, and I've kept adding to my sample through multiple visits to Denmark. I've now worked with about 26 of these guys. They were in their 20s, 30s, 40s, sometimes older. They had been motorcycle gang members for the most part. They had been involved in drug dealing and armed robbery and torture, as I said. A lot of them had been bodybuilders because that's very much part of the culture in the motorcycle gangs. So addiction to steroids, addiction to lots of other types of drugs, and huge amount of mental health issues. Some of them had PTSD, paranoia, stress, anxiety, and so on. And some of them were still in prison when I met them. Others had been released. But basically, what you could say is that these guys were some of the toughest and probably most violent guys in Danish society. So what were they doing when I met them? They were sitting meditating. How did that happen? I became fascinated by this. And interestingly, they'd heard about this program, usually through word of mouth. So again, it's led predominantly, most of the coaches in the program are ex-gang members and offenders and addicts themselves. And word spreads around the prison environments and in the community. And they began to engage with the program while they were still in prison. And the first thing that they always talked about was engaging in this power breathing combined with the meditation led to a huge emotional release for them. So sometimes, in Matthew's case, he started crying in front of people for the first time probably in his life. He began to meet himself. It was a profound experience he had. Other times they talked about great joy, great happiness that they experienced after weeks, maybe months of practicing. This was. Now, sometimes they felt their experience was deeply spiritual, and sometimes they linked that to a religion. So some of the guys talked about how they felt that they had rekindled a Christian faith and they started praying again alongside their meditations. Other times they had rediscovered an Islamic faith and started praying and fasting again, as well as meditating. But more often than not, it was more of a kind of holistic spiritual experience again. So Damon here talked about getting more in contact with his soul instead of the needs that his body had. So I just feel everything's in balance now, he said. You feel calm, more prepared for anything. I feel I can manage anything. And others talked about how it enabled them to get more in contact with innate, softer feelings associated with love and kindness for self and others. Their relationships improved. They had more empathy. So they moved away from a point where when they walked in a room, they were naturally just looking for the person they wanted to have a fight with, or they were scanning the room for danger, to a point where they were able to go into a room and look for the good things and look for the positive things and the peaceful things. They began to masculinize the practices, which was very interesting because Damon talked to me about how, you know, he didn't really want to be seen as a weak guy, and yoga and meditation was something you don't really, he'd heard about it in Sex and the City movies, but beyond that, he'd never heard of anybody doing anything like that. He thought of it as being quite soft or maybe even a bit feminine, as several of the guys said. But actually, once he started doing the yoga, once he started doing this power breathing, which is very physical, he discovered it was actually quite tough. And he felt it was quite a masculine thing. And the role models, again, the lived experience was so important to them. So Sebastian talked here about, he'd heard about a guy, Big Dan, he described it. So he'd gone through the program and he was a really respected guy. He was a real tough guy, you know, and I knew, he said, if a guy like that was able to get something from this, then I would too. He's definitely a really, really, really tough guy. So it was the guys with the bald heads and the tattoos. It was the guys who had been through the lifestyle, the lived experience that gave this program the real credibility that it had. But what I found really interesting about this program was that some of the guys talked about moving away from self-medication, first of all. So William had a severe depression. He was released from prison by the time I met him, but he'd been depressed for several years. He used to have to drink a bottle of wine before breakfast to get through the day. But now, since he's been meditating, he said, at night and in the morning, he felt grounded. He wasn't as anxious. And instead of identifying with all my thoughts, I can actually create a distance. So he was replacing the self-medication with these practices. And interestingly, some of them also came off of prescribed medication during the program. So Damon also had suffered from depression, and he came off of antidepressant medication and replaced it with using the meditation and the breathing and healing himself. Other guys like Marcos talked about having PTSD and having intrusive images when he was trying to go to sleep at night. And he had come off of his medication and now was using the meditation and the breathing and now was able to sleep better. So this has got profound implications, I think, you know, the fact that perhaps these practices can have this level of impact on mental health issues, as well as enabling these guys to move away from the criminal lifestyle. So some people have said to me, it's difficult to distinguish here, you know, who's the academic and who's the gang member. But Jerry here came over for my book launch. He was one of the guys that had gone through this program, now training to be a meditation teacher and to be one of the coaches in the Breathe Smart program. A real gentle guy. In fact, people commented on it when we held an event at the Scottish Parliament that you couldn't have imagined him ever being a gang member, being a drug dealer as he was in the past. The transformation was pretty incredible sometimes in some of these guys. And again, they were beginning to embrace different views on masculinity. Kumar, for instance, just wanted to be a good man for his wife, a good son, a good brother, a good friend, and do the right thing. Sebastian recognised that being macho doesn't involve walking around with a knife and trying to hit people. It means taking care of your family, making sure nothing harms them. And Felix now felt his new definition of real masculinity is being a good dad. Now, again, this program didn't work for everybody. There were some that dropped out of the program because they felt they were ridiculed by other inmates in the prison. So they disengaged with the program. But for the most part, a lot of the guys that I met out in the community had continued to meditate and continued to engage in this program after they'd left prison. And they had a greater commitment to desistance, more secondary periods of desistance, moving away from this lifestyle completely. Johan talked about how he just wanted to have a family. He wanted to fight for what was right and to have a normal life. Elliot talked about how he'd had lots of opportunities to rejoin the gang, but he said, no, I'm stone sure, pretty confident that I'm not going back. Now, I'm in the process of just trying to track these guys. I was back in Denmark last year. I've started to look at where some of them are now, several years on, and a lot of them are still very active and practicing. Interesting, on a Friday night, there's a group that I engaged in last time I was in Denmark, in Copenhagen, where a lot of them come together and practice the meditation as part of a group. So there's a new fellowship, a new brotherhood there. as well, in a similar way to religion offered some of the guys in Hong Kong. So some real impact. And for me, there's lots of implications, as I said, whereas Homeboy Industries has informed practice in Glasgow in many ways, this programme has never come to Scotland in its full sense. To me, I think there's lots of reasons why it should come to Scotland. So purposeful activity in our prisons is very much focused around education, vocationalism and work parties, but not enough focus, I think, on mental health and addressing trauma and addressing addiction in prisons. This is a socially acceptable alternative, potentially, to psychological and psychosocial interventions. Things like CBT programs and talking therapy is sometimes quite difficult for these guys, whereas this program brings the body and the mind together. And of course, we have our own issues with masculinity still here. We need to challenge these damaging stereotypes and hyper-masculine values, but we don't just need these programs in prisons. We need them everywhere. We need them in schools, we need them in youth work, in social care settings to prevent some of this stuff from arising, as well as addressing it once it has arisen. So since the research was completed, I welcomed Jacob and Jerry, two of the guys from Breathe Smart, over for the book launch in September 2018. And the next evening, we held a seminar at the Scottish Parliament, chaired by Rona Mackay, the Deputy Chair of the Justice Committee. So here we had a packed room full of MSPs, practitioners, students, academics. And no, they weren't holding their hands up in support of Scottish independence. They were actually actively engaging in these practices. They were doing the breathing. We're going to introduce you to that shortly. And they were doing the meditations. And really, really supportive of this type of programme. So, as you might know, it's always difficult to try and get new initiatives into the prisons. It's always difficult to get funding. So I haven't managed to bring a full programme yet into the prisons, but what I have been doing is working with my great friend Natalie Logan and our own Jed Neal and other volunteers as we go into the prisons and supporting the work Natalie does in Cisco, and regularly going into Berlin and get into shots and doing some of these taster sessions. We've introduced them to the breathing. Jed's done a lot of work with them on the breathing. I've been introducing them to the mindfulness. And I'm sure Jed would agree and Natalie would agree, it's having a real impact. These guys really responding well to this and now practicing in their own cells. They're now, of course, facing huge challenges with lockdown. But Natalie's been sending stuff in, including breathing exercises and meditation exercises to keep them going during the lockdown. And I'm hoping that the next stage for us will be to actually bring a programme, a full 8-week programme into the prison when the lockdown is lifted, maybe working with organisations like Mindfulness Scotland. And in the meantime, I've gone on my own personal journey and become a certified meditation teacher with Mindfulness Scotland. I did a year-long training and also practicing performance coaching and studying currently with the Coaching Academy. And so it's been a real journey that I've gone on alongside these guys that I've worked with. I first started doing this work because I firmly believe that underneath the tough exterior of these gang members that I work with lies a much softer side, a vulnerable side that simply needs to be nurtured in the right way in order for them to flourish. And I think, you know, in 12, 13 years of doing this work, I can honestly say I've come across a lot of trauma, a lot of woundedness, but I've never met somebody that I would describe as a bad guy. And ultimately, I think this was summarised in Hansi's words here in Denmark. He said, you're not born a tough guy. You're not born with status as a criminal or a moneymaker. You're born a creature open and full of love and creativity. And he was now, after meditating for quite some time and being surrounded by compassion and support and inclusion, he was finding that he was going back to that way of being. And it's my hope that more of our tough guys out there can ultimately become creatures of love and creativity and literally be returned to themselves. So thanks very much for listening, and happy to open it up to some questions now and discussion.
Well done, Ross. That was great. Thanks a lot, mate. You covered a lot of ground there. If anybody would like to put their hands up, there's a few options for doing that. One is you can just use your more button and it says raise hand. When we see the blue hands go up, we can take some questions for Ross. But while that's been formulated, Ross, just covering a lot of ground there. And you spoke about Natalie. You spoke about I've been up in Shotts Prison with you, running a programme. When Natalie was having a wee break over in America, we've been up at Berlin often as well.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of different cultural issues between the various continents, but what would you say in Scotland is missing? So you mentioned, for instance, Homeboy Industries.
Yeah.
The violence reduction unit. We've got Callum and I think James is here as well, who have both come through that programme and work as navigators there. But in terms of size, so you've got an independent organisation that's run by Father J, so independent. And then you've got an organisation here who is run by, obviously, the police, albeit through a charity. What's the difference between both of them?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you mentioned the police, because that is a fundamental difference, because there isn't the police involvement in Homeboy Industries, whereas there is in the violence reduction unit. And I know sometimes I've heard some people being a bit sceptical about that, and saying, well, police, is it really a good thing, and so on. But I think it is a really important part of what they do in the violence reduction unit, because it really gives an important signal in lots of ways. It breaks down some of those barriers that sometimes exist between some of the guys and police officers, but also it gives real credibility, when these guys, and I know that James and Callum will confirm this, when people leave the programme and go for jobs, it gives an added element of credibility if you can say that you've been on a programme where there's been police involvement. If you've got a criminal record, alongside that, you're saying, I've been through this programme, there's been police involvement, and also it's an abstinence-based programme, so they have to be clean from alcohol and drugs. And I think that's a really important element as well. So I would argue that the police involvement is a really important part of it. But it's obviously at a much smaller scale than Homeboy Industries. I mean, Homeboy Industries is huge. It's been going for a very long time. It's got all these industries behind it. It's self-sustaining financially in many ways now because of what it brings in through the industries. Something like Street and Arrow is much smaller, of course. But to me, I think, I don't know what James and Callum would think, but I think we need more Street and Arrows. I think we need many more of these programmes. I think we need them in so many places in Scotland because of the great work that it's able to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting what you say that. I never considered that, Ross, that the credibility comes from when you leave the 12 to 18-month programme and then you access employment, that you can say, albeit I've got these criminal convictions, however, I've went through this project that's run by the Violence Reduction Unit, because I always took the other medium that the only reason that it's got credibility is because of navigators like Callum and James, who go into communities to engage directly with gang members, people running about the cusp of criminality, people in prison, because people like people who are like people. And it's interesting that you mentioned obviously what goes on in Homeboy Industries in terms of it's run on a similar theme to 12-step programmes, and there's a lot of check-ins, and the check-ins are really good because it's a peer-led organisation. And then you look at what's going on in Denmark and you see that the prominence of the programmes and the success that they're having, is that all the main participators in there are ex-gang members themselves.
That's right. And I think, you know, that lived experience is the most important part. I mean, I do think that the guys with the lived experience is the most important part. Mm-hmm. But I think, you know, also, you know, the police involvement adds another layer of something that is really important in Glasgow as well.
But interesting because we've got Ian Smith, who's a criminal defence lawyer.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
coming on Saturday. Ian, he'll talk a lot about ACEs and his involvement with navigating through the court systems. He's at Eureka moment, if that's the right term for it. I waking up and just really saying, well, how come I'm working with guys and then I'm working with their fathers? What is the common theme here? Why is there this carousel? And then we get this information you spoke very well about as well, Ross. This came over from America that is not all conclusive, but there is a massive amount through it. And I just feel that in Scotland as well, it's the same organisations that get the funding from the main funders to do a lot of, which is currently the same stuff that's always been going on, and yet we've always seemed to have the problem. But Ian works with an organisation who I know, another guy, Kevin, from Aid and Abet, who again is using the lived experience mixed with the professionalism and the administration, the back office function of more established organisations like the police, so they can provide a platform. And when I spoke to one of the guys that was involved in one, I think it was Medics Against Violence, it was Keith something's a serving police officer, he was basically saying, aye, your great way of doing it is that how he see it, if we can just provide the resources, the facilitation and the support and let guys like Callum and James really go out there and enhance and deliver these programmes in a way that will reach the people who need to be reached. So it's very interesting that we're having these dialogues at this time. Really interesting.
It is. And I think Scotland has come a long way because, you know, I think partnership is so much to the fore in Scotland, you know, and police working alongside guys like James and Callum, and even when you think about you and I getting into the prisons and working together, you know, a few years ago, you probably wouldn't have seen that kind of model so much. I think the interagency partnership and the quite pioneering forms of partnerships that are emerging is really great, a great thing, and that trauma-informed approach in Scotland.
I think as well, it's great, it's Ross, because it's not just people that's coming for academia, because we're seeing a lot of people coming for the professions as well, but not just that and all. It's a key thing, and it comes, like Gabor Mate says it, that if it's a relationship that's caused the trauma, that only a relationship can fix that. Now, in a lot of stuff, because of the ACEs, it's trauma-informed, and we'll talk a lot about the relationship part of it, but it takes a long time to develop a relationship. And fundamentally, what I see is it going to be the case that people fix other people? So I need to rely on you, Ross, to come and fix me, and I can only be fixed while I work with you. Whereas I like the other model and the stuff where it's about mindfulness, it's about yoga, a process of deep meditation, where you're giving people the tools of real self-healing. You're giving them a tool that can last with them forever. But behind that, we need to support people, because the truth of the matter is, if you have come through the childcare system in Scotland, you've spent massive early part of your life, particularly developmental part, traumatised, multiple traumas that you've just said in ACEs. And then we go into the residential childcare system, and then you leave there and become homeless, go into the young offenders, go into the adult prison system. Your coping strategies, alcohol, drugs, is aggression, is violence, is a means to keep people away from you. There needs to be a process where there is a support wrapped around an individual, but he or she takes responsibility for their own healing. And if the only thing they can do is regulate their breath, then so be it. But then what needs to happen is programmes like anger management, like parenting classes, like access to 12-step fellowships, like group therapy, daily check-ins, gain people responsibility so that they've got that sense of worth by going and earning their own money. But also, there needs to be a caveat with that, is this, that people will not automatically rise up and no make an arse of it. So there's going to be at times where they do maybe relapse, they may get into a relationship, that may become toxic. So they might have bad coping strategies, and there's got to be that thing, I believe, that the support is long lasting, it's wrapped around them, and it's got to be peer led, because it's got to be peer led. And the challenge with that is that there's great work going on in all different pockets of the country, as you know very well, but it's all about sort of independent, particularly when it comes to the childcare system, which is the driver for lots of, which is going to be the barrier that manages to heal trauma and then develop whole human beings back into society. But there's, because of the funding problems, they're all competing against each other. So it's became like a procurement process rather than a shared resources. So it's really challenging, and I like the part where me and you just say, oh, we'll give up our time, we've got skills here, we'll go in there, spend some time with people, here's what I know, take it or leave it, breathe in.
That's true.
That's amazing. I'm just rattling on here because I'm looking for somebody to put their hand up, but nobody's done it. So would anybody like to ask? Oh, here we go.
Gemma.
Is Gemma waving? I'll get Gemma in.
You want to unmute yourself, Gemma?
Hi.
Hi.
Gemma.
Hi, Ross. Thanks so much for that. It's so interesting to hear all the stories and everything that you put into this. It was very, very interesting. I'm studying mental health just now, and I have for a while. I've had my own battles with mental illness in the past, but I think that meditation should be mandatory in schools, in prisons, in workplaces, everywhere. I know how powerful it could be. But also you spoke about the root causes of adverse childhood experiences. Many or most mental illnesses come from that. I think the system right now is not working. It hasn't been working. To ask children to go and speak to counsellors or to speak to any kind of nurse, it's not right. They will be scared, they'll be frightened, they will not open up. For adults, it's hard enough. Yeah. For me, I think that mental health awareness should be in the curriculum. Children have to have tools and resources and support. They have to understand what they're feeling and how they can cope with that. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think there should be compulsory mental health education in schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know that FARMS has been campaigning. Yeah. You come across them. I participated in one of their events last year. They've been campaigning for compulsory mental health in schools. And I know that we have the health and well-being element of curriculum for excellence, but it's too diluted. It's not enough. It's not enough.
They don't want to teach children about real trauma because they think that it's going to make them worse, but they don't realise that it'll make them feel better. And the thing is, why sugarcoat it? You know, you have to get in and you have to help them understand the raw emotion that they could possibly feel later on in life. And we all go through a lot of traumatic events in life, so it's more than likely that we're all going to suffer from either anxiety, low mood, depression, PTSD. There is so many different disorders that anyone could get, but the thing is, it kind of comes in a cluster as well. So with me, I had like maybe 5 disorders at the one time, but I didn't understand, and that's why I didn't get the right help. But whereas even for children, you know, we have to now do something and be honest. You know, if we're not being honest with children, they aren't going to be honest with us about what is going on and how we can help them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think, you know, these programs need to be part and parcel of what happens in school. I think it needs to start from primary school. Because, I mean, as you know yourself, the mental health issues are, you know, out of control among children and young people. And, you know, a lot of that is maybe coming from social media. I think social media plays a big part in it. But I think when we come out of this lockdown, you know, it's going to be even worse. There's going to be children really, really socially anxious, you know, going back to school with the threat of all this coronavirus and so on. And I think even more than ever, we need to have this in place.
It's great. Thanks for that question, Gemma. I'm just going to move on because we've got some other people who want to come in. Graham's iPhone, I'm looking to mute you, but can you do it yourself? Okay, so Galaxy Tab, you've got your hand up as well. If you can unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi Jed, how you doing?
Good.
Hi Ross, so
Hi.
I thoroughly enjoyed listening to everything you had to say there, and as soon as you started off with Easterhouse Skinheads, I totally tuned in, because I came from just across the road for that. I'm a Berlanach boy.
Did you? Ah, yeah.
So I grew up in that kind of environment, and I had aces. I now know that, but when I was a younger kid, I just didn't recognise it. So part of my growing up was running about with this gang called the Bar L, and I thought everybody did that because all my pals were in it. It gave me a sense of identity, and you kind of run with that, and it's all good stuff.
Yeah.
It's adrenaline based, all that kind of gear. And then, but the thing is, the further this goes on, and the further you're prepared to take that as an individual, and you see these guys who become the top boy, and you want to be that as well.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of peer pressure, and you try to do all that stuff. But along with all that stuff, then comes police involvement, and then it's once you're taken away from them and you're left by yourself. It's about when you put your head on the pillow at night that you actually know how much fear that you've got in your life, but you don't kind of recognise it. I kind of, through getting into trouble, I then ran away and joined the army, which was just part of a bigger gang. Do you know what I mean? And no recognising it at the time, but still driven with that fear. And when I came out of the army, I knew work in childcare. So I'm a residential childcare worker. And so the things that I use in my life is my experiences when I was a young boy. And through my situations today, through a kind of spiritual recovery in my life, I then try to pass that on to them. But it's age appropriate. So I work with teenagers, and it can be very, very difficult. And the thing that I found that works for them is the kind of power example. So see, if you've walked the talk, the walk, you can then pass all this stuff on to them. Some of them listen and some of them don't, because they've got this, nothing can happen to me. Do you know what I mean? I'm infallible. This thing with being a teenager. But it's only when they start to get into their bits of trouble where my experience really counts, where I can then sit with them and say, listen, this is what I experienced when I was a young guy, that putting my head down in a cell and greeting, do you know what I mean, uncontrollably, and greeting for my man, my dad, and praying to anything that was out there to get me out of that trouble. Do you know what I mean? But I love the work that you and Jed are doing, and it's absolutely fantastic. Do you know what I mean? So. Oh,
thanks. Yeah. No, I mean, I think, you know, what you're saying there about the Easterhouse young skinheads, you know, and about being the top boy. What I've noticed recently is, probably come as no surprise to most, you know, when the most recent research I'm doing, I've been doing a lot of interviews with young people in the schemes again recently for a new project, and it's the territorial issues have really diminished, as you might know, and there's hardly any gang fighting, although it's not gone, you know, but there is a much less of that, but much more of the drugs and much more of the drug distribution networks, and younger people getting drawn into it and exploited by dealers. And you know, that's the next big thing that I think we're going to have to tackle.
So that's great. Thanks for that question, Jim. So that's us basically came to the end of that. Would you like to do some breathing? Do you know, Ross?
Yes.
Some guided meditation, possibly?
Yes. So I was going to introduce you to, first of all, the bellows breath, and maybe do a short body scan if we've time, Jed. How much time do we have left? Oh, you were on mute there, so.
Yeah, you're muting me and I'm on mute you. So I would go for 15 minutes or so, Ross. So right. 10 past 1, look to finish there. So include the breath, maybe 12 minutes.
Okay, so
body scan.
So if you'd like to try the bellows breath, I don't know if any of you have tried this before. So basically having your arms, so this is one of the things I learned in the Breathe Smart program, having your arms close to your chest with the fists pointing towards the ceiling. And basically, I'll just demonstrate first of all. So it's very, very sharp inhalations on the way up, and then a very deep exhalation on the way down. So let's do about 10 of those together, okay? Okay, and then just taking a rest. Just maybe closing your eyes, noticing any effects from that. Noticing maybe the feelings in your arms, your shoulders. Maybe a little bit of breathlessness or tingling. When you're ready, do another cycle. So deep inhalation on the way up, deep exhalation on the way down. Let's try 20 this time. And relax. Just closing the eyes, noticing the after effects. So what this does is it begins to release oxygen into your bloodstream, and it just brings a little bit of energy into the body, and it opens you up to being in more of a meditative state. So the way I use it is I use it before I do a meditation, just as a warm-up activity. And there are lots of other things you can do with the breath as well. But so this time, let's do another. You can do it in cycles of 10 or 20, maybe for a few minutes each day, and see the effect that it has. But this time we'll do another 20, and then we'll lead right into a body scan meditation. It's ready again. And relax. Just allowing your eyes to close. And finding a comfortable position now. You can either, if you choose, to lie down, or you can do this body scan sitting on a chair as well. Just allowing the attention to travel to the breath. Noticing the after effects of that movement. Maybe you feel a slight sense of tingling, oxygen being released into your bloodstream. Just allowing the breath now to come back to normal. Noticing each in-breath and each out-breath. And as you sit here or lie here, just allowing the focus of your attention now to travel right down through the body and focus on the feet, becoming aware of the toes. Noticing any sensations in the toes. Perhaps feeling of tingling, pulsing. Noticing any sensations in the big toes. Sensations on the surface of the skin and deep inside the toes. Perhaps there's no sensations, and that's okay too. We're not trying to create sensations, but just noticing what's here already. Noticing also the little toes, the toes in between, the spaces between the toes. Perhaps feeling of air between the toes or moisture. And then gradually allowing the focus of your attention to travel to the soles of the feet. Sensations are here. What feelings are here? Noticing also the heels, the points of contact between the heels and the floor, and the tops of the feet, and the ankles. Now taking a deeper breath. And in the next available out-breath, allowing the focus of your attention to travel to the lower legs. What sensations do you find here? And then focusing on the knees, the knee joints. And then gradually focusing on the tops of the legs, the thigh area. Then gradually in the next out-breath, allowing the focus of attention to travel to the hip area and the buttocks. It's a large area of the body. You just breathe with whatever sensations you find here. All or any sensations. And in the next out-breath, moving the focus of your attention to the lower abdomen. Perhaps noticing the breathing here. The stomach wall expands with each in-breath and deflates again with each out-breath. Just seeing if that's true for you. And if the mind has wandered, it's not a mistake, nothing's gone wrong. This is just what minds do. Perhaps thinking about planning, worrying, memories, daydreams, or perhaps even a feeling of restlessness, feeling that you want things to hurry up, sometimes pulling at your attention quite strongly. When you notice this, just noting where the mind is gone, not judging it in any way, but gently escorting your attention back to where you'd intended it to be, now in the lower abdomen, breathing. Now taking a deeper breath with the next out breath, allowing the focus of your attention to travel to the chest area. Noticing the way the chest rises and falls as you sit here breathing. And then allowing your attention to wrap right round the body and focus on the lower back. What sensations do you find here? Sometimes this is an area of the body where there's tension, or stiffness. And rather than turning away from that or trying to fix it in any way, turning towards that sensation, breathing with it, breathing into the sensation, allowing it to be just as you find it. And gradually allowing your attention to travel to the upper back, including the shoulder blades. What sensations do you find here? And focusing on the shoulders. Allowing the shoulders to drop just a little bit more away from the ears. And then focusing attention on the arms. The tops of the hands. The palms of the hands. And the fingers. Just exploring all or any sensations with an attitude of gentle curiosity. The mind has wandered again. Just congratulate yourself that you're awake. Noticing where the mind goes is part of the meditation. Just bringing it back without giving yourself a hard time. Gradually allowing your attention to travel to the neck. Then to the side of the head and the ears. Then focusing on the face, the jaw and the chin area. The mouth, the tongue within your mouth. And focusing on the nose, perhaps noticing the breath in the nostrils. Cool in the in-breath and warm in the out-breath. Noticing the cheeks, the eyes, the eyelids, the eyebrows and the space between the eyebrows, the forehead and the scalp. Now just imagining a small hole in the top of your head, and that the breath can travel through that hole, right through the body and out through the toes. And then it can travel right through the toes and back up through the head. The breath filling the whole body as you sit here or lie here. Just coming home to the body as a whole. Coming home to this moment. Now just allowing yourself to sit with no particular focus of attention. Just being here. In this moment. Complete and whole. And then gradually, in your own time, beginning to bring some life back into the body. Perhaps wiggling your fingers and your toes. Perhaps taking a stretch if you need to. Just taking this sense of awareness and warmth with you into the rest of your day. As you gently begin to open your eyes.
It's great, Ross. Brilliant. Fantastic. So, well,
guys,
we're just coming back into our body. I'll just allow them to take a few moments just to adjust to that. And thank you for your time, Ross.
Thanks no problem. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, it's been good listening to you. And
I know some people have sent messages, so I'll have a wee look at them.
Yeah, that's fine. So on Saturday, we have Ian Smith coming. So Ian's going to do Bad for Business, the defence lawyer cutting crime with compassion. He'll do some stuff round about the ACEs, give you the science behind it, but also give you his experience navigating through the court system. He's a court lawyer, criminal lawyer. and we'll also do the same, so about 40 minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer session at that. I've sent everybody out a link already to that. It's live on Eventbrite. And now I would just like to thank everybody for their participation. I'll thank you, Ross, and I hope you all tune in on Saturday. Thank you.